Dad, let's talk.
I'm busy. Next time.
He put the cup in the sink and hurried up the stairs to the upstairs. I sank exhaustedly onto the table. I closed my eyes, but I couldn't hold back the tears. I couldn't bear it. My father hates me. And I don't know how to go on. It wasn't always like this. We were a happy family who had barbecues on the weekends. My mom's infectious laughter, my dad's sparkling jokes were now a pain in the soul. Everything had shattered into tiny shards in an instant, and now they can't be glued back together. I'm sorry my story has such a sad beginning. My name is Anna. I'm 16, and this is my story. That night we were going to my dad's boss's birthday party. We'd been family friends for a long time and often spent time together. It was going to be a big party. Mom spent half a day doing makeup, trying on dresses. She paraded in one and another, waiting for Dad's approval. But for some reason, Dad was nervous. He grumbled all day, which wasn't like him at all. Mom whispered that maybe the boss, Mr. Stone, was going to announce Dad's promotion, and that's why he was nervous. I hadn't paid attention to it then, but now, that detail was surprising. Mr. Stone greeted us warmly, and Mrs. Stone gave me and my mom a big hug. Everything was as always, friendly atmosphere, delicious dishes, quiet music, and Philip, kissing me on the cheek, pulled me upstairs to his room on the second floor. We sat down to play a new computer game. Philip is Mr. Stone's son. We're the same age and in the same grade. My parents have been teasing us for a long time, saying, "When are you going to start dating?" That night, Mr. Stone winked at me when he saw Philip hugging me. And only Dad looked at Mrs. Stone in silence, and she lowered her eyes. So strange. It was the first time I'd ever been able to dive into those memories. I didn't notice such details at the time. We'd been playing with Philip for hours. There was laughter coming from the living room. Our parents were having fun too. Toward midnight, my mom called out to me. We started to go home. I fell asleep in the car. I was awakened by the horrible grinding of wheels, the howling of brakes, my mom's scream, and a bang, and then darkness. I woke up to the pungent smell of medicine. It was hard to move. My whole body ached. I'm in the hospital. My dad's with me. He was exhausted. His eyes inflamed. He stood up abruptly and sobbed when I called out to him.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, daughter. I don't know how it happened.
He kept muttering and I couldn't understand. A nurse came in and when she saw that I had regained consciousness, she sent Dad out the door. I just heard her ask him in a stern voice, "I hope you didn't say anything to her. The poor girl has been through enough." Then they injected me with something and I fell asleep again. For a month I knew nothing. And that, looking back, was probably my last happy month. I woke up, I was fed, I was bandaged, I was examined. I started to slowly get back up. Then I slowly walked around the room. Everything was slowly healing. My dad visited me every day. We chatted, little by little, then I'd be sedated again. And I'd drift off to sleep. I felt better. Physically, but the anxiety was growing. I could see my father's sunken eyes when he came in. Dad was afraid to look at me, and I was afraid to ask. It all came to light at discharge. A nurse wheeled me in my wheelchair to the exit and whispered in my ear, "Sweetheart, be strong. I'm sorry you're without your mommy." I wasn't ready to hear that. The truth, spoken out loud, destroyed me. But seeing my father in pain, I suffered in silence. Things were different at home. It was quiet, sad, and empty. Dad had all of Mom's things. He was at work all day long. In the morning, I made breakfast for him and myself, but I never heard a thank you in return. I didn't resent him. Daddy was having a hard time. We were going crazy in our grief. I took sleeping pills to sleep. And in the morning, antidepressants. After a month, I forced myself to go to school, to distract myself. He didn't question me. He didn't bother me. But he was always there for me. Today I felt sick in class and asked to go home. I had a headache. It must be those antidepressants. At home, when I opened the door, I went straight to my room on the second floor. But from the kitchen came my father's quiet voice.
Stop it. Don't call me again. Time is of the essence, Courtney. We made a terrible mistake back then.
I froze. Courtney? That's Mr. Stone's wife's name. But why is she calling Daddy? And what kind of mistake is she talking about?
Eavesdropping?
Dad was standing in the doorway, looking as grim as a cloud. I nodded negatively and ran upstairs. From that day on, I started having nightmares. In my sleep, I kept hearing the screeching of brakes, my mom screaming, and a bang. I woke up in a wet sweat, and I couldn't sleep until morning.
What's wrong with you, Anna? You haven't looked like yourself lately. Circles under your eyes.
At recess, he was looking at me anxiously. I didn't know how to tell him.
I've long wanted to offer you. A year ago, I went to a psychologist. I had a difficult period and he helped me. Maybe you'll feel better when you talk.
I don't know why, but I nodded in response. A beautiful woman with a soft voice invited me to sit down on the couch. Liz, that's how the psychologist suggested I address her. For a couple of minutes, we sat in silence. She waited patiently. Then I took in more air, and for the first time, she said out loud what had tormented me for a long time. My mom died in a car accident. And then I told and cried, and I told again. For the first time in months, I didn't have nightmares. Liz was slowly unraveling the tangle of my suffering. We found out that I didn't remember a lot of things. Liz explained that my brain was purposely storing these memories somewhere in the back of my mind. That this temporary amnesia was my body's protective response to the horror. And I could try hypnosis if I was ready to remember everything. So I decided, as I listened to Liz's soft voice, I drifted into slumber. And suddenly I found myself sitting in the back seat of the car. Mom and Dad up front. Night, streetlights. We're on our way home from hanging out at Mr. Stone's. I thought I fell asleep in the car, but actually, it was a good night, wasn't it? Everything was so delicious. Courtney outdid herself. Daddy didn't say anything. Honey, what's wrong with you? You haven't said a word all night.
Jess, we need to talk. I can't lie anymore, and you don't deserve this.
I know what he's going to say to Mom.
Courtney and I had a relationship, and it was a mistake. But I want you to know, I love you. I'm sorry, Jess.
And Dad reached out and put his hand on Mom's shoulder. For a second, he took his eyes off the road. Suddenly, we were blinded by the lights. A big truck was coming at us. Dad tried to turn the wheel. Mom screamed. The brakes screeched, and the impact. Anna, it's okay, you're safe. Liz was holding me tight. I couldn't breathe. I was shaking, and I could hear my dad's last words in my head. He killed my mom. By admitting his mistake, he did something irreparable. And now I know it. That's why Mrs. Stone called him. They are traitors. Everyone's a traitor. When I calmed down, Liz drove me home. She waited for my father to get home from work, and then locked themselves in a room and talked for hours. I don't know how Liz did it, but after their conversation, my dad came out to me, fell to his knees, and started apologizing. We hugged and sobbed. We mourned for my mom. For the first time, mourned for our family. And we forgave. Dad forgave himself, and I forgave him. Now we're trying to move on with our lives. Every day is an effort. We talk a lot. Dad quit his job. We're thinking of moving to another city and start over there. It was really hard to tell you this story. But I've learned that you can't carry grief around, and you have to live it. You have to grieve it and move on. Life is one, and each of us is the master of our own life. Remember that.